All right, guys, I wanted to give you an overview of our work this week. We had planned on doing a second interview, but we want to give you some time to digest the interviews that you just finished. I know some of you were having upload and recording issues, so we wanted to give you a little bit of a break from having to record and give you time to clean up odds and ends. But it's also important for you guys to start to digest all of those interviews. What have we actually collected, and what is the story that these interviews enable us to tell? So what you're going to do this week is you guys are going to create an outline based on your interviews for the story that's starting to emerge. And I want to stress, this is not what you believe the story is. This is not based on your opinion. You guys can't make up the story that you want to tell for facilitators. You have to figure out what is the story that we're learning from our interviews and tell that story. I'm going to try to make this quick. We went through and created a sample outline using that life behind bars. So your outline may not look like this immediately because, again, all you have right now are your interviews. But we want you to start thinking about these things. We want you to start thinking about how will your section of the documentary begin? What's the main idea or the theme that you're trying to get viewers to understand? What am I going to learn when I watch your particular section? What's the goal? Because you want to establish that filter of asking, does this interview meet that goal? Does this piece of footage meet that goal? And if it doesn't, then it gets eliminated. So if we take a look at the outline here, and you guys have access to this doc as well, they start out with sponsors. They give some context for the story. Where are we? What are we looking at? We have this transition from our sponsors to the context, the student talking about the purpose of prison. And then they show us a whole bunch of footage about prison. Okay, so I know this story is going to be about prison and prisoners. But then they have this transition using an interview and using the students reading this passage that they had to memorize. That moves us beautifully into the classroom. And now, as a viewer, I'm going, wait a minute. It's a prison, but it's a classroom. They're learning something. They're talking about being in literature class. So this, to me, is the hook. This hooks me into their story. This is why this story is different. It's not just about prison. It's about these prisoners trying to get an education. Okay, here's where we get to the meat of the story. The idea that part one is nobody taught me. It's kind of broken into three different sections. Where are we? Okay, this is where they establish location. We're at a particular prison. We're in an American history classroom. Again, I'm getting that conflicting story. It's about a prison, but it's about school. And then the meat is, what is this program? And this is where our interviews come in. So we've got this guy talking about the idea that it's a college in prison. We've got the founder and executive director talking about how they've always viewed these students as no different than others. And then they talk about their degrees offered using the text. And then we start introducing the students. That's the goal. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the outline here. On the outline you create, and again, this is just an initial outline. This is going to grow as you do a second interview, but we want to use this as an organization tool for your crew, a planning tool, but also a really good tool for your editors too. So what we want now from you guys with this submission is, what's your main purpose? Okay, what is the story you're telling? For that first episode of Prisoners Behind Bars, their goal was to establish that it's a story about a college in a prison where all the students happen to be prisoners and they're working towards getting an education. That's all that first episode focused on. If they had footage or interviews that didn't come back to that main goal. It didn't get put in that first episode. It got shifted somewhere else. So what is your main purpose or goal? And it can't just be, we have teachers and we want to show how teachers are doing in isolation. That's way too vague. Look at your interviews. What patterns do you see in your interviews? What is the story of the facilitators? Because it could be a billion different things. The story of teachers in quarantine right now is different main campus to Eagle Tech. It's different main campus to middle school. It's different from our school district than it is at Busco, than it is in Fort Wayne. So what is our story of our Eagle Tech staff and facilitators? Remember, it has to come back specifically to our driving question. Okay, so what's your purpose? And then we want at least 2 main points. You can have more, okay, but at least minimum 2. So for example, how are facilitators coping and how is admin supporting? Let's say those are our 2 main points. And again, we're going with the faculty and staff example, this idea that it's not been easy for them, but everyone keeps pressing on to do their jobs. Okay, subpoint 1, so we're going to talk about, let's say I had interviews and I saw a pattern, teachers talking about some of the struggles they've had. So we're going to include those there. This is what you each individually must do. Okay, you must do. You can add made points, you can add subpoints, but you all must listen to your interviews and go in and place your interviews somewhere in the outline. Where is a relevant piece from your interview and where can it go in the story? Okay, this is going to help your editors a lot so they don't have to watch 6 hours of interviews. So let's say I had an interview with Mrs. Hannah. I put my name, it's my interview. Here's what she's talking about. Here is the timestamp where she begins to talk about that. Okay. It might also be helpful to put on here what you named the file. Okay. That way your editor knows where to find it. Okay, this is super important that you all go in and you break down your interviews. You don't have to edit them. I mean, I guess unless you want to, you can cut them into chunks, but you don't have to. Okay, just listen to them and figure out, what am I contributing to the story? Okay, let's say subpoint 2 is adapting to a new workspace. So I went through 2 other interviews. This could have come from Mrs. Hannah's interview, that's fine. But you want to go in and place, where does your interview content fit? Then start thinking about next week's interview number 2. What are you missing? If I need another bullet in here for struggles, or if I need another sub piece for admin support, or if I want to add a whole nother main point, a piece of the story that's missing, use this outline to plan your interviews. That way you don't have random interviews that don't fit in the story. Okay, so use this to plan interview 2. Also use this to start thinking about B-roll. Okay, so if I know Hannah's discussing, I change this, her workspace, okay, I can say, okay, I can add in what B-roll I need, because now I know I need to ask Mrs. Hannah to get that for me. Okay, use this to plan.